the rule should be 80% promotion, 20% creation. So 20% of your time creating it, 80% promoting it. Most people spend 80% of their time creating it and 20% of their time promoting it. And well, so the thing about being a good marketer is you have to learn how to pivot, right? And so an entrepreneur is the same thing, and knowing when to hold and when to like change. And so you got two choices. You can go to a farm and find a chicken and kill it and take it home and cook it, or you can go to the store and get the chicken, right? AI is going to the store and getting the chicken. And before, a lot of the content and things we had to create, we had to basically go to the farm, like we're starting over from scratch and whatever. It took us getting really deep into understanding, like, well, why was the last time you took the cruise, and what did you enjoy about it, and why, till we got to that really base reason. It's like, I like to go because I don't have to worry about anything, or I like to go because I like to explore a new destination. So you have to be careful and make sure that you really understand the true motivation.
Okay. As per your wife, your most often used phrase?
The good news. People say, the good news is, I've been told that I say that often.
Hello, fellows. Welcome to the next episode of Jagged with Jasravee. Subscribe to my channel for conversations at the edge with thought leaders from the branding, marketing, and the business world. Conversations that ignite new ideas with rough and sharp edges. Hi, Eric. Thrilled
Hello.
to have you on my show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so Eric, if I requested you to tweet your profiles on the very controversial X, what would you say?
I would say that I'm a parallel entrepreneur and a recovering technologist, and I'm often referred to as unemployable. So because I couldn't really ever keep or hold a job, I've always created my own companies, and it's a good way to handle my ADHD because I'm always changing topics.
I don't know who said this, but they say if you have tasted freedom, you become unemployable.
True. That, or they see that you've done it and they're like, oh, you're used to starting your own thing. I don't think you want to work here.
Yeah. Yeah. So laddering, Eric, I first came across this technique because I started my career with qualitative market research.
Yeah.
And we were taught to use it with patients and how it's not just about asking why. So
right.
Why don't you share what fascinated you about laddering? Because you then take it and apply it to many, many areas. What fascinated you about it, and what is a myth or a misconception that you'd like to bust for marketers about it?
So I kind of started in my intro that I'm a recovering technologist. So I built technology back early in my career. And one of the people on our team, we were about to launch a product, and she wanted to take it and do what was called then usability testing. So very strong kind of qualitative piece. And so we took the product, we put it in a lab, we put somebody in front of it who was supposed to use it, and they didn't understand how to sign into it. They didn't understand how it worked. Like, it was a complete miserable failure. And so I fell in love with it. I'm like, this is amazing. And so from 2002 to 2012, I owned and started a research company that was very strongly qualitative. And what I learned in that is you can't accept the surface answer that someone gives you. So often when you talk to them about a product or service, they'll say, oh, if it were the right price, or if it were this. And that's just like a thing they say to kind of get you to go away. And so you've got to get deeper understanding, kind of down to, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like what is the base thing that's going to kind of titillate that person into deciding that they're going to purchase your product, use your service, talk about the idea or subject. And that requires, kind of being like a little kid. You keep asking them why, but tell me more about that. Why, right? And I always would start conversations when I would do the research piece of, I'm not going to judge you. I just need to know the answer, and they start to almost treat me like their therapist. And so really getting companies to get beyond the surface of what they think internally, because often they have assumptions about why something's not working, which is not true. And then when they bring in people, they want to do focus groups or kind of some models that don't work as well. It's really most effective to get one person in a room with a thing that you want them to consider, talk about, whatever, and not accept the first two surface answers, because it's once you get into that third, fourth, or fifth answer that you get the real stuff.
So when you said like a child, that was very telling, because there is no assumption and it's a clean slate, okay, totally open to, and yet you're going to go with your own sense of curiosity. You won't get stopped at what you think you could stop at. Typically we just accept answers. Acha. Okay, that's why you do this. Fine. But
yeah,
a child would satisfy his or her curiosity till the very, very simplest of understanding has been achieved. Awesome. So you said that this can revolutionize marketing. So product usability is one aspect. So why the motivation, like you talked about the Maslow's? What other areas laddering can be used for understanding what aspect of marketing?
So I was uniquely positioned in the fact that we started the research company in 2002. And in 2002, technology was hard and the user was easier. And then as we got to kind of 2008, and in 2008, we got smartphones, we got ubiquitous internet, so internet everywhere, and social media. And those three technologies were highly disruptive, and technology became easier. It was just easier to get something out into the market, to get people to understand it. The consumer truly became, we've talked, I think, since like the 90s about the consumer being in charge of the buyer journey. Well, it really wasn't until like 2008 that was true. And so there was a pivot, and the technology became easy and the person became hard. It became hard to really understand them. So laddering allows you to group and organize people into persona groups. And those persona groups then let you understand what products or services or messaging are really going to be relevant to them. So instead of starting off with, I built this thing and how do I make it work for the user, you start with, hey, I have a user or I have a customer. What is it they need? And let me build to that need. And so that pivot, I feel very fortunate to have been part of kind of a qualitative company during that pivot, because we watched it. We watched like, we can only build this one way and we got to get the most people through it, to we can build anything. We just need to know what they want and how they need to see it. And so we had to understand what they really cared about and not make assumptions about how we were going to build it or do it. So, yeah.
It is tough to not have assumptions. I think to let go of your biases, or to record your biases and acknowledge them and then get into the questioning mode. This is really tough. To actually keep doing it and, have an open mind to a fresh understanding.
Yeah, and you talked about so that's the difference even in quantitative and qualitative. So there are people who are kind of numbers-based quantitative people, and the mindset is different. And it's not one or the other, like they both inform each other. So quantitative will tell you where to go look from a qualitative perspective and, investigate. Qualitative needs to be confirmed quantitatively. So you use kind of both sides, but knowing that typically, very rarely is one person both a qualitative and quantitative person. Most of the time you're either on one side of the side of that or the other. So getting those things to work in concert and not make too many assumptions on one side or the other before you've confirmed it through the other is the right way to really approach it.
Yeah. Mindset is so different, like you said. And, I think there's a why deficit today, because the what is so easy to understand. There's so much of data, e-com, social listening. You go anywhere, all the social listening will give you a bit of qualitative understanding as well, but it's mostly what. So the why deficit, and there should be a why movement. We should, because there's so much data, and unless you question it, you can just make it mean anything.
Yeah.
So what is the concept of the 5 whys? And if you could explain it with a case study.
So one case study that I really like that we did is we had a cruise line come to us. So they did cruises, and they told us that the people that bought their cruises were all boomer women. So the boomer generation. And so, if they had built a website based on being boomer women, then it would have been about being an empty nester, time of your life. Like it would have had all these visions of someone like walking on the beach, those kind of things. So we listened to them and like, it's all boomer women. So we did a study and we included 40 boomer women. So we talked to 40 boomer women. We didn't talk to a man. We didn't talk, that was the only group that we talked to. And what we found out when we got to the end of that, by taking this kind of overall why mentality, it had nothing to do with them being a boomer woman. The boomer woman's credit card might have been used to purchase the cruise, but the reason they were cruising was not about that at all. And it was more far reaching. So what we found is that typically people cruise for one of three reasons. They cruise because they want to go to a unique destination, and a cruise ship is an easy way to get there. So if you're going to the Galapagos or something like that, then you go there. And for the cruise line, that means you can put the cheapest cruise ship on that cruise line because all the people care about is the destination they're headed to. Another group cruises because of they go to the same place every year with friends, and they like the casino and the disco and the nightlife because they're there to party. And so you want to have like your latest cruise ship with all the party things. They don't even get off the cruise ship at the ports because they just are there to have a good time. And, they don't have to worry about driving home and, all those kind of things. Everything's included. So that group was sort of they were about partying. And then we had a final group that was a leisure group. And so they cruised because they didn't want to have to change hotels multiple times. There were a lot of, pools and places to hang out. Their food was taken care of, all those types of things. And so that was a leisure group. And so the website that we ended up building, instead of building it about boomer women and, that, we built it such that it had those three different categories on the homepage, but not overt. Like we weren't like, do you like to cruise because of destination? We had pictures of destinations. We had pictures of people partying. We had pictures of people being leisurely. And based on the content they selected, we started to fine tune their experience to that specific topic. And so it took us getting really deep into understanding like, well, why was the last time you took the cruise, and what did you enjoy about it, and why, and why, and why, and why, till we got to that really base reason. It's like, I like to go because I don't have to worry about anything, or I like to go because I like to explore a new destination. So you have to be careful and make sure that you really understand the true motivation, because people will use things like money, or they'll tell you time or whatever. But we all know that if something's important enough to you, you'll spend whatever money it is to get it. And you'll take whatever time it takes to do it. So that's never the truth. It's just never the truth.
Yeah. And I travel, and the way it's taking meaning for people, it's so interesting, especially after the COVID times. I'm working recently on a travel project. The aspect, the motivation is so different. And like you beautifully explained, for the same generation, it could be different in terms of what experience is calling you, and hence what you're prioritizing in life, or your mindset, or it could be so many other reasons, but the experience that you want is going to decide what is important and how you go about structuring your stay. So
and that's an important thing. Personas don't know age. So you can find someone who's a destination person who's in their 20s and someone in their 60s. So when you're thinking personas, they're not going to be demographically based. It's not going to be male or female or age or any of those types of things. It's innate to who they are. So it's a core part of them. And so laddering is getting to the core drivers, and the core drivers can be different from context to context, because there could be, I talk about spenders versus savers. So like people who like to spend money and people who like to save money. Spenders will go to a discount store to purchase things they don't care about because that gives them more money to spend in places they care about. Where a saver is always going to spend in a discount location because the game for them is how cheaply I can get something. So really understanding that motivation, like you can't assume that, you see a nice fancy car in a discount mart. You're like, well, why are they doing that? Well, they think the toilet paper should be the least amount as possible so they can go spend money on clothes or restaurants or whatever it is, the thing they like to spend on. So, yeah.
Okay. So then we move to content, and it's a very, very interesting topic, because when people think content, it is engagement. It's like, okay, if I'm getting to engage my consumer, with content, that's itself is a big task done. So likes, shares, and comments, and stops there. You are talking about content that converts.
Yes.
So, and with an
primarily,
example. Yeah.
yeah. So we primarily work with what we call B2B companies. So a business selling to a business versus a business selling to consumer. Now, I don't agree with that terminology. That's how people talk about it, but it's really the difference between relational and transactional. So for transactional, if I'm selling something that's pretty simple, I just need to run the right kind of discount or give you a buy one, get one free or whatever. And content honestly isn't as important, messages and offer. But when you work in the kind of categories we do, where the sales cycles are long or there's a lot of risk, you have to have what we call content that converts, because that person's going to spend a long time in the buying process. Have traditionally found research that's like 21 times that they have to see your brand and then another 6 to 7 to convert. I saw a stat this week that the number might be 31. So it's all this stuff that's out there over the period of time that you're making this very important decision in your life, which could be a surgery that you're deciding to do one versus the other, or a piece of software you're going to install for your company, something that's going to have like a major impact. Because if you make a decision at your job and your boss doesn't agree, you could get fired. If you install a piece of technology, you have to live with it for the next forever. We've got a piece of technology we would love to replace, but we have so much invested in it, there's no way we ever could, right? And so people who make those decisions don't make them based on one thing. They're not going to go read one article and then be like, oh, I'm going to buy, or see one social media post or whatever. They're being exposed to your brand, what you do everywhere. And they're typically going to your digital properties last. So you need to make sure your content is spread in places that they're participating. So are they on Medium? Are they on X? Are they on Instagram? Like, what are they seeing? And continuing to reinforce and know that pieces of content, you look at them over time. So in social media, it's like in the moment, like how well did it perform there? But when you're looking at other pieces of content, you can have a piece of content that you put out and for the first month or so, it just really doesn't get the kind of traction you would expect. But over the next 2 or 3 months, it becomes one of your better pieces of content and you need to lean into it. So we have society is very instant oriented, and most marketing tactics were built around transactional. So like driving someone to do something. Marketing now is responsible for the relationship. So you have to create content that converts over time. And so that's just, putting enough out there and making sure that you're going to be in the places that your customer is, because you don't have any control over where they're going to look for your products or services or read about your business.
That's a very, very interesting perspective. Eric, you are a podcaster as well. So I'll ask you to talk about that content and where you rate it and how it works. But the long term, because like you beautifully put it, that content is looked at in the short term, the instant gratification, but there's a content that will grow in influence and help the brand or the person as a brand grow in influence if it's at the right place. And there are multiple points of interface that work together, that should work together. So I'll get to, or maybe you'd like to talk about and put in perspective about content of a podcast, a video cast, blogs. What kind of content did you have in mind when you said that? What works long term?
Well, I say all of it. And we love anything that's video-based content. And the reason we like video-based content is that it's the greatest order of content, because you can take a video piece of content and turn it into a written blog. You can turn it into social media. You can turn it into snippets. So I have a podcast just like you do. Part of the reason we do it is to get those little bitty bites, bite-sized chunks of what people say. And we can use that content forever. I've written for Inc., and I wrote Inc. magazine. And I did like 160 articles there, and those articles get reshared, and they still find them relevant today. So I'll run into somebody and they'll either have seen my podcast or seen that article, and they're like, oh, I just saw your whatever. And I'm like, oh, you did? Which one? And then they'll tell me, and I'm like, I recorded that 2 years ago, but it was relevant to you today because you cared about it today. So the rule should be 80% promotion, 20% creation. So 20% of your time creating it, 80% promoting it. Most people spend 80% of their time creating it and 20% of their time promoting it. And you'll even see they'll go do like a big event and have someone on a stage. They don't record it. Like they've spent all this time and energy and effort to send someone out to like get them on a stage to give a presentation, and then they don't talk about it again. And I'm like, no, the work just started. Like that wasn't the hard part. We don't breathe and go, oh, thank goodness we're done with that. You then need to make sure you're really using that long term, because you go to a conference, even if there's 10,000 people there, your audience of customers is larger than that. And so those 10,000 people, not all of them came into the conference. They weren't paying attention to you anyway because they're multitasking. Like you need to figure out ways to reuse and retell. And, we as customers will get bored with our own content because we're like, oh, I'm talking about it all the time. But your customers are just now coming into the ecosystem and catching up. So you have to repeat those messages, do all those things. So, we talk about the website being kind of your best brochure. Content is the next layer, and that's what people really pay more attention to, because anyone knows what you do typically by the kind. Like, I'm a marketing company. I bet you do social media and ads and things like that, right? But what makes us different? And then you use social media and SEO as your accelerant on the content on the website.
So this is another 80-20 principle again. 20 create, 80 promote.
Yes.
I'd like to know the why of why promotion is less, honestly. And I wonder if there are cultural differences, but it's so true.
Well, they think they're so important. Like people like, oh, I created this thing. Of course, everybody saw it. And it's like, no, like hardly anyone saw it. So like, we got to get it out there again and again and again. So create things that are evergreen, reshare them. Don't be afraid to do it. You're not going to exhaust your audience because they don't care until they care. Like if they're not looking for your solution or what you do, or you're not really within their, brand awareness. So we talk about a thing called BATCOM. So it's branding, awareness, traffic, conversion, optimization, and maintenance. BATCOM. I wish it were a Liger word. It's not. It sounds more like Batman or something. Everyone wants C. They want conversion, but you can't get conversion unless you have traffic. You don't have traffic unless you have awareness, and you don't have awareness unless your brand is right. And so we have to step clients back. We're like, I get it. You want to make sales. We all do. How do we get to conversion? We have to fix these other things. And then once you have conversion working, you can do the optimization and maintenance. So, that is the kind of way we look at anything when we're working with a client. If they're getting a lot of traffic and it's not converting, we have a different problem. Like you're starting to diagnose the patient, right? Like, and that's what we call our initial sessions with clients, brand therapy. So we're kind of getting to the deep, dark, like, why do you think of it that way? And what are you stuck in that you think, but yeah, it's got to be.
Imagine clients coming out and saying, oh, I feel so better.
Yes.
It's cathartic.
They either feel better or they kind of hate me because they're like, he
showed me the mirror.
Yeah. Right. And now we got some things we got to fix and change and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Very interesting. So before awareness, you said, what is the B for?
Brand. So it's branding,
yes,
awareness, traffic, conversion, and branding is my favorite. It's my favorite. So, looking at what the client's brand is, understanding, we don't change a brand unless we really think it needs to be changed, because it takes so long to establish. And what I see companies doing, smaller companies, a big company, their brand is always consistent. Like when you see their brand, you almost know it before you see the logo, right? Because like I talk about Old Navy, Apple, and Target, all three of those brands use white. That's one of their primary colors. And their advertising can start and you're going to know who the brand is before you see the logo, just based on the way that the ad starts, right? So big companies do that very well. Small companies are not as consistent with their brand as they should be, and they're spending less money on marketing. So it's way more important for them to be super consistent. Every time their logo shows up in a certain way with a certain thing, it should always look the same. It should never change, because if it does change, that 21 times that I talk about to establish branding starts over, because your brain goes, oh, that's something different. It's not the same one that I'm used to before. So it's boring. Like marketing at the end of the day can be boring unless you understand that the point of it is to like reinforce this look, this feel, this, who your brand is, those types of things. So small companies are like ready for a change. They're like ready to do and it's like, do we really want to do that? Because we're resetting the clock in some ways.
I guess familiarity with a twist works. I mean, if they want to bring some freshness or delight the consumer to get noticed because it can become a blind spot, then that the whole challenge is not to stay familiar, yet, refresh the engagement.
Well, it's like we talk about activation. So branding is a set thing. So the way the logo looks, the colors, the whatever, but then you can activate that brand in different ways. And so, but there's got to be some consistency to how, so that you realize the activation has something to do with the brand. So it's kind of, which one are you talking about? Like, so when a company won't let us touch the brand, we think through how do we do an activation that, is compelling for people to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about content creation must be aligned with company's authentic identity, what do you mean? And if you could share with an example. Maybe
well,
you might have already touched the topic. Yeah.
Yeah. We talk about branding. We talk about content being like a magazine about your company. And so we all know, or maybe, I don't know your age. I'm old enough to know what a magazine is, but you used to walk into the bookstore and there would be magazines, and there would be magazines about different things. And so
if it reflects on my age, then I might just feign ignorance.
Okay.
Well,
nothing. What is a magazine?
Yeah.
So you walk into a bookstore, there used to be magazines up on these shelves. And so if you had an interest in a topic, you would pick a magazine based on how the front cover looked and maybe the stories that were in it. So like cooking, I love to cook. And there's magazines that are like simple night meals, but then there's some like Cooks Illustrated that explains how they got to the menu and all those kind of things. Those are different audiences. And so how that brand looks and then the way it kind of shows up as a magazine is how you think about your brand. And so if you are a Cooks Illustrated, meaning you're going to explain every ingredient, you cooked like 300 cookies before you came up with the right dozen, and you're selling me a ready-made cookie thing, it's probably not on brand, right? Like that's not how that works. And so you have to think about the fact they smell the sell. So like if you try to make your brand inauthentic to what you really are culturally, like that's why understanding internally who you are and what you stand for, because the brand once established has to carry through to the onboarding and the customer service and the very last day that you work with them. Like all of that stuff has to feel the same. We've all done I thought that restaurant was going to be great because I saw the pictures, and then you show up and you're like, oh no, that was not what I expected at all. So it doesn't do you any, it doesn't benefit you to try to fake what your company really is. Just own it.
Yeah. And there you can use laddering to understand.
Yes. And attract the right kind of customers, right? You want to attract the customer you're looking for. So if you do that well, you'll make the most money because you've got your ideal client profile, and you can only get your ideal client profile by laddering. Deeply understanding why they work with you or buy from you or, appreciate your products and services.
So content creation and AI-driven era. So where is this evolution going? Pros and cons? What excites you?
AI is just like the internet and social media and smart, like all that stuff. And so there's the people who are against it and the people who are for it and whatever. It's here. We're not going to change it. And what you have to think about it is, so we're in a category, what I'm calling now, of curation over creation. So instead of creating, you're curating. And we still have to have people who curate. There's literally no reason to create some of this stuff. Like the 7 tips for starting a business are probably the same 7 tips, right? They really are. But what is my unique perspective around that? So if I use AI to help me come up with those, then I need to add my voice to it. I need to make sure I agree with it. I need to add my, all my benefits. And so AI lets us curate instead of create. It also is a great research tool. I get introduced to new companies all the time. They're doing things I don't know about. And in the past, I would have to assign someone internally to go do the research and tell me what is it that they do and where does it fit, or I'd have to go do it myself. I can go ask AI in 5 minutes. I know exactly what they do, where they fit, how it works, all that kind of stuff. I've saved myself time and money. I've saved the client time and money, and then I can move to what they've really paid me for which is to advise them on what to do next. They really don't want to spend the money with me to like get me up to speed. So if I can go talk to this like research tool that's helping me. So I see it as a really great assistant and moving people forward. There's just so much in it. Regrettably, it will replace certain jobs, but that was true of blue collar, and we don't have people who make
technology,
buggy whips today. So like you got to do something else. But it does allow us to learn and collaborate on things a lot faster. So I'm very high on it. I think it's going to be a cool thing. AI doesn't know how to cry. It doesn't know what's funny, right? Like, so the human nature is where you bring in, and that's where you have to add the sizzle to the top of it, but it gives you the base. It's back to my cooking analogy. You got two choices. You can go to a farm and find a chicken and kill it and take it home and cook it, or you can go to the store and get the chicken, right? AI is going to the store and getting the chicken. And before, a lot of the content and things we had to create, we had to basically go to the farm, like we're starting over from scratch and whatever. I think you still have to be a good writer to know if the AI is doing it correctly. Like you can't skip that. Someone who's not good at writing is not going to look at an AI thing and know how to edit it and make it correct. So anyway, yeah, that's my opinion.
You can make it generate something, but is it doing anything to you? Did it move you? Did you make you, laugh, cry? That judgment and discernment, human being will have to get, because in the end, your consumer would stay a human being.
Human being.
And
we can always
robots.
unplug the AI tools. And we all know, like, good grief, like all the technology around us, it takes the least amount for it to not work.
Yeah. Okay. So since you wanted many topics, you didn't say so, but we gathered.
I've got a lot of things I talk about. So yeah.
It's all linked, like you said. So B2B marketing, again, B2B marketing is about building relationships for long-term benefits, which is awesome, because I think marketing itself at some level is, any relationship that we're trying to build, if you're making deposits and building equity for long term, that's really, you're using your thinking and foresighting, etc. Then you talk about how demand generation is not lead generation.
Yep.
That's very interesting. That distinction would be very useful.
Okay, so I'll talk about the second one, because I think that, the first one's easy. Like marketing used to be transactional, and then the salesperson would establish the relationship. So they'd drive you to the store, and then the salesperson would be like, hey, I have 2 kids, you have 2 kids. Marketing has picked up a lot of that. So they establish the relationship. When you look at demand gen versus lead gen, the mistake I see B2B businesses doing in that category. So one is kind of paying, demand gen is like staying in front of people, building content relationship. Lead gen is I want people to actually convert somehow, which means they're downloading a white paper or giving me their email address, whatever. And that typically requires you to have some paid component in place. And so what I see B2B companies doing is they fall on one side or the other. They're either only relying on organic and doing no paid, which means that they're limiting how much testing they can do. It takes a lot longer. Or they're doing a lot of paid and they're not building any of the organic. And so that means if you turn off the paid, then all of your leads go away. And so you need to know how to balance those effectively. And B2C companies do a better job of this. They do a better job of thinking about those and putting budgets in the right places. But we'll have companies that show up on our doorstep and they're spending all their money on ads and they have no content in place, nothing to like organically grow them from a demand gen perspective, or they're just spending all their time on demand gen and they've never done any ads. And so we have to balance that. I think about it like a financial advisor portfolio. So like, what are the components that you're using and how do we make sure we have a good mix so that in case one of them doesn't do well, we have something else we can backfall on. Or like Google can change their algorithms and all of a sudden your demand gen doesn't work the way that you expected. You have a lead gen side to supplement. So those words get mixed up, but mostly I put them in the category of, are you continuing and establishing that relationship and doing things organically, or are you paying to get someone to like actually raise their hand And that raising of hand doesn't mean I want to buy from you or see a demo. It just may mean that I'm going to let you talk to me in a more intimate way, like via my email address or text message or something else.
You've taken examples, but if like a case study where you had to explain this to your client and they were really like shocked or surprised. So why is it so difficult to understand? Yeah.
Yeah. So because we work in some really boring spaces. So we do a lot of like fintech and financial services, and we do insurance, and we do healthcare and that kind of thing. Insurance is a good example because literally insurance, we're still faxing each other 5 or 6 years ago. They may still be faxing, like sending, a fax, put the paper in the thing, whatever.
Oh, that.
Yeah. And
I've seen some people, I've seen it in Bollywood and Hollywood.
Okay. I like it. And so, so those companies are so used to like paper and people and whatever, they don't get the concept of paying, right? Specifically B2B insurance. And so that's been what we've done with some of our clients is we've reached the outer limit of their organic reach. And so convincing them to do paid has been the way that we've been able to pop them past. So like their search and all that stuff is like at a base. And then all of a sudden we add some paid components to do some lead gen, and then we start to see it go up. Right. And so there are ways to like play with that and use it as a lever to get yourself to that next level. So if you've seen that you're kind of flatlining in one category, you may need to put one of those other techniques in place to kind of give you a lift up to the next level. Because if I can only stay within the organic reach of my employees and my company, I'm not getting to people who could be interested, but they're not seeing my message. So I may have to pay for that to get the message out to the rest of the universe. So yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. When you were talking about 20% creation and 80% promotion, and sometimes people are creating just, like entrepreneurs might be doing it for lead generation or for demand generation. So what would you advise that what should there be? Because a lot of startups, they get into this for obvious reasons. So how can they do their 80% promotion right? Because again, this is, if it's linked.
Yeah, I mean, on the B2B side in particular, relational, it's a lot about education. So I'm educating, and then I'm asking you to buy, right? So like the number, and it's probably still an 80-20 because I'm about to say 4 to 5. Like if every 4 times you educate, you have 1 time you can ask, right? So that's 80-20, right? So it's like, don't ask too often. Like you should really want them to, you don't want to sell, you want them to buy, right? Like, so if you've done it correctly, you've convinced them you're the right person to buy from. That stat I used earlier about, so 70% of the decision is already made when the person picks up the phone, walks into your store, sends you an email, or reaches out to you. They've already decided to work with you. So all you're doing is either signing the deal or screwing the deal up. They want to buy from you. And so if you think about how much time you spend, don't ask for it. Just continue to educate. And then you do need to ask at some point. Marketers are bad at like continuing to give away things for free. So having someone who is a salesperson who's like, hey, I think it's time for us to like do something and get people to, but make sure you're really feeding that audience a lot of content that makes them remember you when they're in the buying cycle for that product or service.
Okay, so Eric, you talk about marketing and entrepreneurship and that there are similarities. So please enlighten us. This is very interesting and very unique perspective.
Well, so the thing about being a good marketer is you have to learn how to pivot, right? And so an entrepreneur is the same thing, and knowing when to hold and when to like change. And so what we run into in a way that we end up managing the marketing tech stack often is because IT people want to do something and do it once. Marketers are constantly changing, and entrepreneurs have to constantly change based on the environment that you're in, the way that things look. So you have to think entrepreneurial as a marketer, but not make changes so dramatically that you impact your success. So it's this delicate balance. You got to give it enough time to see if it's going to work, but at the same time, don't be an idiot and like try to run something for a period of time and be like, oh, like you may need to pivot. Like pivoting in marketing and pivoting in entrepreneurship is not about a dramatic pivot. I'll talk to companies who are like, we pivoted. And I'm like, no, you didn't. You started a brand new company. That is not a pivot, right? A pivot is a slight like, oh, we thought our ideal client was this, but they're really this. We thought this piece of content was going to work, but this piece works. So it's making these kind of fine-tuned adjustments to your business model or plan. Same thing with marketing. You have to be fluid. Rigidity doesn't work very well in the marketing world because things are always changing. Like they're always changing. The
fire.
Rapid fire. Okay,
yay,
got it. Yeah.
And you have to be rapid and fiery. If you take time to think or you elaborate, I will be shooting you.
Okay, perfect. I love it.
Okay, mother's best advice.
Mother's best advice, never be late.
Oh, okay. Alternate profession could have been?
Oh, so a therapist. I would have been a therapist or a writer, journalist. I love journalism. They just don't make enough money.
Yeah. What would you do on Mars for fun?
On Mars, I would be bored, terribly bored. There'd have to be other people. I can't be anywhere locked away for any period of time. And that sounds just like a terrible idea.
Okay. As per your wife, your most often used phrase?
The good news. People say, the good news is, I've been told that I say that often.
That's nice. That's really nice.
Yeah. Well, typically I'm like couching it of like something bad, but the good news is.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. So that's a smart usage. Okay. One thing no one knows about you.
I went to a military college, which most people wouldn't think or expect. So yeah, had my head shaved and went through their like ROTC and the whole thing.
So your dad was into it because your mom is also talking about discipline?
No, I went there because they had a relationship with IBM and I wanted to go to work for IBM. So it was a way to get into IBM very early in my career.
A book you'd like to gift to all your friends cannot be your own.
E-Myth by Michael Gerber. So it's the book that helped me change the way that I looked at my business. So it's about working on your business instead of in it.
What would you tell your 18-year-old self?
To have more fun. So I started working at the age of 18. So I kind of like jumped right into my business career and I probably would have done like the European trip, and gone and spent 90 days backpacking or something. So yeah.
What's something new happening in life right now?
Working with a new company. So we have a partnership with a company and we're looking at putting together like a private capital kind of concept and doing some investment in some companies. So I'm always doing something new. That's always happening. So yeah.
Nice. So what's your favorite childhood memory?
I had a four-wheeler as a child and we had trails behind our house. And so when I would come home in the afternoon, I could go out and ride on those trails for hours. And it's just such a nice, like, because to go now and ride a four-wheeler, like you'd have to plan it, whatever, but we like had 5 acres of trails right behind us and I could just take the four-wheeler out and just rode it for hours and hours.
Wow, what a memory. Okay, if you were to devote the rest of your life to philanthropy, what cause would you choose?
I would work with probably survivors of like childhood trauma.
Wow. Wow.
Because I think your early days are so impactful into kind of how you perceive yourself and what you do moving forward. And so it's tough for people to even understand what those experiences are and how they're impacting how they're kind of living their life today.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How to interpret them, how to put it in perspective. That's awesome. Yeah. So what is one missed opportunity that you wish you could have a second chance?
I don't know that I look at it that way because I have had lots and lots and lots of opportunities to do things. And I almost always say yes when somebody asks me to do a thing. And I know that where I am today is based on all of the experiences that I've had in the past. So there's some things I did that I wish would have lasted longer. Like I really enjoyed that phase or what was going on, but I have this, people say you can either be sad that it happened or happy that or sad that it's over or happy that it happened. And so I think about it as I try to be happy that it happened.
Okay. So this is a wrap up now, Eric. I request you to share your online address, email, any which way you feel people can reach out, connect with you.
Yeah. So the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. So that's where I'm the most active. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's kind of my social media platform of choice. The company is ligerpartners.com. So, and I'm just simply Eric at ligerpartners.com. Oh, I had a great time. And you have such a good structure to the way, and you do so much research on who you're going to talk to. So I was very impressed by how you put your script together, and just full of good information, full of good information. You will not be replaced by AI anytime soon.
Yeah, that's an original compliment. Okay. From somebody who loves technology and consumers and marketing. That's memorable for me. Thank you so much, Eric. It was amazing. It was